I used to drink so much soda and fruit juice and stuff, and looking back, I think a huge part of it is because the tap water here where I live, sometimes it tastes fine, but sometimes it tastes absolutely disgusting, and like I have friends over and they're like, this is awful, your tap water tastes like algae. And sometimes it's a little bit milky. I'm sure it's perfectly safe, but I never bought bottled water. That was never a thing I did much. But at some point, I was like, I need to cut down on the sugary drinks for my health. And and if I'm not drinking my tap water, I probably should just buy water. And I started to go buy like a whole bunch of bottled water. But then I discovered that they just sell just like whole jugs of water like milk. And like, I didn't know they sold it like this. And it's more expensive than tap water, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than bottled water. And I think it tastes just as good as bottled water. That's just me, though. If anyone else there has never even considered just buying jugs of water like this, like milk, I would consider looking into it, especially if you drink too much soda or fruit juice. I have really mixed feelings about doing that. Like, just drinking straight from the carton like this. Just, I don't know, on an aesthetic level. Like, it's not rude or anything because nobody besides me drinks out of these things. Like, in my apartment. Like, no one's gonna drink out of this particular one. So there's nothing unhygienic about it. But part of just on an aesthetic level, part of my brain looks at this and is like, you're like this medieval peasant drinking wine out of a jug, and that part of me is like, this is really cool. This feels really cool. That I'm just chugging a whole bunch of stuff the way my ancient ancestors did. That makes me feel great. But then the other part of me feels like a teenager sneaking milk right out of the carton and from the refrigerator in the middle of the night. Like, part of me feels like this is just sort of inherently gross and rude in the modern day. And every time I drink out of this, like that, I have those conflicting feelings. So much more convenient than like getting a glass out, though. All right, so I have two things I want to talk about. And I have lots of things to talk about, but these first two things both have a lot to do with me personally. They both have a lot to do with like my life story in particular. So I'm gonna kind of go chronologically a little bit. I'm gonna do a little bit of like the video autobiography of Xidnaf is a little bit what this is gonna be. Are there any other smart kids watching this? Like kids who were the smart kid in school? Or at least a smart kid? Are there any other kids out there, or adults who used to be kids, who were or are told that, oh, you're so smart? Whoever in like, what was it called? The thing in elementary school they had, like special gifted programs to like challenge students who were especially gifted somehow. Are there any other kids out there who did really good in elementary school, who were really, really smart in elementary school and were never really challenged in elementary school? And then they got into middle school or high school and it was even, and like it got bad because like you never learned how to put effort into anything? Are there any other kids out there who people saw them or still see them as really smart, but then you started doing really badly in school? Did people tell you that you weren't living up to your potential? That you should be doing so much better? That you could be doing so much better, and therefore you should? Were you ever told that your grades weren't a reflection of who you are? Like, were you ever told that this doesn't make you not smart? Were you ever told, you're really bright, you're really smart, if you applied yourself, if you really gave this your all, you could be doing so much better than this. Like, this isn't a reflection on you. This isn't really who you are. You could be doing so much better. It sounds nice, but let's think about that for a second. First of all, let's talk about this idea of intelligence, because our society has this really, really weird attitude towards intelligence. We're going to come back around to intelligence, but I took a cultural anthropology class last semester, and we watched a video that interviewed a whole bunch of women from this small rural village in East Africa. I think it was Kenya, but I'm not sure. Definitely East Africa somewhere. And this village practiced female circumcision, which is a word that refers to a broad range of, people call it female genital mutilation when they're not feeling charitable towards it. And I didn't feel very charitable towards it at all before I went into this video, but this video really changed how I looked at it, because before that video I saw it as something that was inflicted on women by their culture. But when I saw the video, I saw it more as something that all women participate in. And maybe they kind of have to, maybe they don't actually have a lot of choice in it, but this video interviewed a ton of women who talked about how they were excited for it. They were excited to have their genitals mutilated in this way because it meant that they were a woman. And they interviewed these women on the other side of it, and they talked about being glad that they did it, and they talked about a lot of stuff, and it didn't make me think that female circumcision was good, but it made me feel a lot more ambivalent towards it. It made me feel like any effort by societies outside of this society to get it to change its ways need to be careful, because this isn't just straight up violence perpetrated by some people on others. I started to see it less as like witch burnings and more as bloodletting, if that makes sense. Like it's definitely like bloodletting instead of witch burnings. It's still awful and violent and medieval, but it's not something that's inflicted on people by other people against their will. It's something that everyone participates in because they think it's good. And one thing was really striking to me. I promise we're going to come back to around eventually. One thing was really, really striking to me. People from this village talked a lot about how strong they were when it was done to them. The women who underwent this female circumcision ritual, they would talk about how much they screamed when it happened. They would talk about whether or not they cried, whether or not they screamed, whether or not they had to be held down. And if they did scream and cry and had to be held down, then they kind of laughed it off. They were like, yeah, I wasn't very strong. Guess that's just how it was for me. But if they were strong, they wouldn't want to say it themselves, but other people would say it about them because people would want to be modest. But when a mother was talking about her daughter, she would be so excited, like, my daughter was so strong during it, and like, isn't she amazing? And it wasn't just then. Throughout the whole video, even in times not relating to that particular ritual, the way they talked about strength was really interesting to me. We do this a little bit in our culture, but the way they talked about strength, like, not strength as in physical strength, but strength as in your ability to withstand pain of any sort, your ability to help others and not ask for help, your ability to just withstand what life throws at you without being a burden on the people around you. This seemed to be a really, really, really important quality to these people. And the way they talked about it, they made it sound like this idea of strength was almost the same as the person's moral worth. Like, you can't be, like, the way they talked about it, they made it sound like a person can't be weak and still a good person. And almost like they almost talked about it as if a person a person who was strong couldn't unambiguously be a bad person. Like, being strong this way was a really, really admirable quality, regardless of anything else. And that was really weird to me. Like, we do that a little bit in our culture with strength, but it was it was that, but like way, way stronger in this little African village. And I thought about it for a while, and I realized that I think our culture treats intelligence the way that African village treats strength. 'Cause can someone be an idiot but still a good person? If you know someone pretty well, you can tell them, you can be like, I think I'm a better cook than you. I think I'm physically stronger than you. You can even tell them, I think I'm a harder worker than you. But can you say, I think I'm smarter than you? Can you say, I think I'm more intelligent than you, without it coming off as just this grave insult? Some people say that there's different kinds of intelligence, that there's emotional intelligence and mathematical intelligence and artistic intelligence and interpersonal intelligence and intrapersonal intelligence. I think that's true to an extent, but I've also seen a lot of evidence that all of those things kind of correlate with each other, and if you're really smart in some ways, you're more likely to be smart in other ways too. I think it's a little bit like, I think there's a good analogy to be made with being physically strong. I think when it's not all that likely that your left arm is going to be really, really buff and your right arm is going to be all bone. Like, it's a little bit weird for some muscles in your body to be really, really strong and others to be abnormally weak. It happens, but usually if people who work out tend to work out like their whole bodies. Don't skip leg day is a whole meme. Like, because people tend to, like, if you're strong in some ways, you're probably strong in other ways. And I think if you're smart in some ways, you're probably smart. I think if you're smart in some ways, you're probably smart in other ways too. And a lot of the way we measure intelligence is complete nonsense. The IQ tests are just have just this awful, awful racist history, and they've never really been able to shake that. But with all that said, I think intelligence does exist, and I think intelligence kind of corresponds to like a general ability to keep more ideas in your head at once, and to think faster, and to learn things faster. I think all of these things are kind of intelligence. And when you think of it that way, it's not that hard at all to see that school isn't a reflection on that, like, at all. Like, school is mostly a reflection of conscientiousness, basically. School is basically a measure of, like, how hard a worker you are, how organized you are. Like, school doesn't measure how intelligent you are so much as it measures your ability to handle a whole ton of busy work and keep track of it all. And that correlates with intelligence a little bit, but even if you're a really slow learner, you can get through school pretty easily as long as you can, like, keep track of all your homework and make time for all of it. But another consequence of this is that, like, intelligence really doesn't matter. Like, in the Middle Ages in Europe, and like in 1200s Western Europe, also, well, let's leave Eastern Europe out for the conversation. 1200s Western Europe, basically everyone was Catholic. Basically everyone believed some really weird thing. Basically everyone thought that the sun went around the earth. Basically, although they knew the Earth was a globe, but basically, like, people believed a lot of really weird things. Okay, I'm an atheist, so like Catholicism is the easiest, like, is the easiest thing to hurl a rock at right now. But like, no matter what your religious beliefs are, most people disagree with you about that. No matter what your political beliefs are, most people disagree with you about that. Like, there's a great variety of both religious and political beliefs. And here's the thing. Really, really smart people believe all of those. There are very smart communists. There are very smart fascists. There are very smart liberals and very smart capitalists. There are very smart Catholics. I have met some. There are very smart Protestants. I've met some of those too. There are very smart Muslims, very smart Buddhists, very smart Hindus. And I think that's really, really self-evident if you just look at like any of the literature that any of these cultures and traditions has produced. Like, you can't read, I don't think you can read Marx and come away with the impression that he wasn't pretty smart. And I don't think you can read John Locke and come away with the impression that he wasn't really smart. There are really smart people from every major religious and philosophical and political tradition, and really dumb people from all of those too. Which gives me the very strong impression that being smart doesn't make you more likely to be right about most of the really important things in life. And I've seen that there's like research backing this up too, that when you show people facts that contradict their worldview, it really rarely changes their mind, and that doesn't change if the person is really smart, because smart people are able to come up with ever more elaborate ways to justify what they wanted to believe anyway. Analyzing the things you believe and like why you believe them, and trying to keep yourself away from all kinds of like weird biases that affect people, and trying to keep yourself from believing the things that the people around you believe just because the people around you believe them. And going out of your way to actually do research and like listen to other points of view and like try to keep an open mind to them, all of that is kind of orthogonal to intelligence. You can be great at all of those things or awful at all of those things, whether or not you're intelligent. And I think it's important to remember that, because a lot of the time in our political discourse online, we blame the problems in our society on idiots. This politician wouldn't have gotten elected if it wasn't for all of the idiots voting. I honestly don't know how universal this is, but in a lot of places I go, it's treated as if smart people all believe what I believe, and dumb people all believe what the other people believe, what they believe. They are all dumb people and we are all smart people. And it is the dumb people who are ruining society for everybody. And that way of thinking it's not accurate at all for all the reasons I just said. And it's also it's an awful way to think, partially because it makes a lack of intelligence a sin, almost. It makes being dumb something that makes you a bad person. It makes you part of all of the problems in society. Being dumb hurts everyone around you if you think this way. So, coming back finally to school. When you've been told all your life you're smart. I hope now it's clear why when people tell you you're smart, that's almost the same as telling someone that like you're almost a better person than everyone around you. But here's the interesting thing. If you're smart, but your grades are suffering, why would that be? Under this weird way of thinking that our culture has, where like I just talked a whole bunch about, like, intelligence really doesn't matter. It doesn't make you more likely to do well at school. It doesn't make you more likely to be right about all the important things in life. It doesn't make you more likely to be doing more harm than good politically. And it certainly doesn't make you a better friend or all kinds of things. Like, being smart really doesn't matter. But that's not how our culture sees it. Our culture seems to think that intelligence is... Our culture seems to think that intelligence is almost synonymous with the moral worth of a person. But there is this interesting thing where our culture allows for the existence of smart assholes. There's actually a lot of them on, like, TV. There's a lot of them in lots of places. We love watching smart assholes. We love watching people, like, the one that comes to mind immediately for me is House. From the, House MD, the TV show. But there's loads of them. Cracked did a good video about that. When you look at how many smart assholes there are, and when you compare that to the number of well-meaning idiots, it's really interesting, because I think the well-meaning idiots, they are out there, but they're kind of pitiable. Like, they often cause problems. They often make things worse for the people around them in a way that the smart asshole doesn't. The smart asshole comes along and begrudgingly fixes the problem for everyone and cleans up after the well-meaning idiot. But that's really interesting, because it implies that our culture seems to act like it's better to be a smart asshole than a well-meaning idiot. But it does admit that, like, both, like, ideally it would be better to be both smart and nice. What I'm saying is that, like, while our culture does in fact value smartness over niceness, and kind of conflate the two a lot, it does allow for the existence of smart assholes. So anyway, if you're smart, but you're doing terribly at school, what does that mean? What does it mean? Think about this. You could be doing so much better. You should be doing so much better. This doesn't reflect your potential. Your potential is so much higher. If your potential is higher, if you're smart enough to do well, then what does that imply about why you're doing as well as you're doing? It implies you're not trying hard. It implies you don't care. It doesn't imply that your organizational skills need work. It doesn't imply that you're depressed and need mental help. It doesn't imply that you're suffering because social media is screwing with all of our brains in ways that we barely understand yet. The implication isn't you're struggling and need help. The implication is you need to try harder. The implication is you're not trying. I have this fantasy sometimes where I think sometimes about, like, what would I say to myself 5 or 6 or 7 years ago? What would I say to high school me? Because the people around me wanted to help me, but looking back, I don't think the people around me knew how to help me. And sometimes I ask myself, I think about this, and I think I would ask myself, are you doing as well as you can? And high school me would probably say, no, I could be doing so much better. And then 23-year-old me would say, do you know how to do better? Do you know what you need to do, what you need to change about your life exactly to do better? If you just need to try harder, do you know how to try harder? Will you try harder? And I think 16-year-old me would have said, I don't know. I don't know how to do better. I'm trying. I should be trying harder. 16-year-old me would say, I should be trying harder. But I don't know if I will. And I don't know how to make myself try harder. I don't know how to get myself there. And I would ask, and then 23-year-old me says, Do you want to do better? 16-year-old me says, yes, I want to be doing better. And then 23-year-old me says, if you want to be doing better, but you're not, doesn't that almost definitionally mean that this is as good as you can do? Why do you say that you could be doing more if you want to be doing more, but you're not? If you're trying to do more, but you're not getting there, that looks an awful lot to me like you can't. Fellow current or former smart kids out there, what if instead of saying, this doesn't reflect your potential, you should be doing so much better, what if instead someone had told you, you tried your best, it's okay. It's okay for you to be where you are right now. This is like, what if someone had said, this is okay. We'll help you try to improve if you want to improve. But you tried your best, and we appreciate that. And we're willing to try to help you do even better. Man, I wish someone had told me that when I was 16. And if anyone listening right now is 16, or 13, or 50, no matter what age you are out there, if you need to hear that, I want to say that to you now. Because if you're trying, if you want to do better, but you're not doing better, then this is all you can do right now. And if this is all you can do right now, then like, kind of definitionally, like, this is your best. This is what you can offer right now. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe you're in a situation right now where if you don't do better, there are really bad consequences. But I want to say that not being smart isn't your fault, and being smart and not doing okay also isn't your fault. Like, if you're smart and still struggling, like, that's not your fault. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't work to try to improve yourself if you want to. That doesn't mean that trying to figure out better strategies to improve yourself and try to figure out how to live with yourself better and like get yourself to perform better and accomplish better goals, that doesn't mean that all of that is useless. But if you're struggling to manage your time and you're spending all of your time goofing off, that doesn't mean you're not trying. If you're spending all of your time playing video games, like I know from personal experience that that's not fun. It's not an enjoyable life to be wasting your life, to feel constantly like you're wasting your life. But when you can get trapped in a cycle where you feel like you're wasting your life, and that makes you feel awful, so you need something to just kind of numb that pain right now, because you can't deal with that pain of feeling like you're wasting your life otherwise. And the more you just and the more you rely on whatever it is to numb that pain, sometimes like the worse your life gets and the more you need it, and you get into a vicious cycle and you get trapped. And getting trapped isn't your fault. Like, no matter how much time you feel like you're wasting, if you feel like you're wasting it, if you don't want to be spending that time the way you're spending it, then it's not really your fault.